Hello everybody, it's your favorite West Virginia in space here, and now let's talk about SCP. Now, I love this fictional universe, and some of my most popular videos are from the SCP universe, particularly the Daybreak stuff I've occasionally done have been very interesting. Probably should do more of that at some point, but that's beside the point here. But one of the things I've always found incredibly fascinating that most other people in the fandom just do not, I think, care quite as much as I do about is the whole factions or different groups that take place in the SCP universe. Maybe it's my love of factions and different sub-factions, all that jazz talking, but I really love the dynamic that some of them have. Now, of course, canon is basically non-existent within the SCP universe, and only certain tales even begin to follow a structured set of rules. However, I wanted to kind of talk about at least some of my interpretations of the different factions in the SCP universe, or what I consider to be the 5 main ones, at least if I was doing stories generically. Anyway, how about we get started with, of course, the one, the only, and we all know who I'm going to do first here, Scp Foundation. The Scp Foundation is the most powerful out of all the 5 groups, at least when it comes to numbers and probably the understanding of, well, the anomalous. They are probably the oldest, unless we count some other sub-factions, but generally speaking, they're the oldest main faction out of the 5. Their major goal is, of course, secure, contain, protect. Basically, their desire is to contain the anomalous. They don't seek its destruction, or really to use it in most cases. They simply wish to contain it, to keep the world normal. They don't care about state boundaries or who's in power or other things like that. They just want to keep the world normal. Of course, they're the ones that kind of decide what is and is not normal to a degree. They go to great efforts to conceal the anomalous, though not objectively cruel in this method, at least not unnecessarily. They are willing to go to extreme measures to maintain this. If an entire town sees something anomalous, they'll either make them forget, and if that doesn't work, exterminate. They are the most dead set on making sure the anomalous never gets out. Like, all the other factions could deal with it, though they try to keep it secret to some varying degrees. The SCP Foundation cannot allow this, for whatever reason. They are controlled by the O5 Council, and they are, like I said, global. There is no place on Earth they do not touch or do not find. However, they are not above using the anomalous or killing it when necessary, though not considered their primary goal. They rely on D-Class to do manual stuff and often be meat shields, and then they have doctors and soldiers to do more obvious things. They contain everything in specially contained areas when possible. It's often clumped together, known as areas. Each area is generally considered to have a certain amount of a specialized role. But of course, some of them are also lost or unknown what their actual purpose is. The SCP Foundation is, like I said, the oldest out of the 5, and so as much as they are so much older, most other factions borrow their terminology and tactics if they don't have an alternative that they themselves have made. The SCP Foundation doesn't tend to use the anomalous unless absolutely necessary, or when it can use it to contain other SCPs. However, it is well known to have a pseudo-special class in their group called Doctors. These doctors, quote-unquote, though not all of them or many of them possess any medical degrees, are pseudo-anomalous entities who oftentimes don't know they're anomalous, or others as well, who often run sites or areas. They are considered to be some of the most powerful agents the SCP Foundation has access to, and should not be messed with unless you're ready for a good fight, even if they themselves don't quite understand that. The SCP Foundation is perhaps the middle ground of all factions in this way. They simply want to keep the world as it is. The Global Occult Coalition is the second major faction in the SCP universe. They, quite frankly, seek very similar goals to the SCP Foundation, to keep up normality. However, this isn't for the same reasons. They don't really care what is or is not considered normal. Simply, they want to keep their member nations happy, healthy, and secured. They are, unlike the SCP Foundation, actually directly funded by multiple governments. And as such, they have a bias to the governments that fund them, and they don't care as much what happens to the governments that don't. They simply seek to protect their member nations at all costs, which often means keeping out the anomalous that could pose a threat to that nation's sovereignty. As such, they sometimes overlook more minor issues unless it could be led in some way or shape or form to a bigger problem. However, of course, this is all somewhat arbitrary, as what they deem as important can be somewhat arbitrary. The Global Occult Coalition is, however, not some ruthless military organization. Well, it is, but it's not like it was formed from nothing. It was actually formed from many occult coalitions and different occult groups across the world, mostly once again within the member states organization after the Second World War, as a means to stay ahead of the competition and to make sure that to keep themselves in power. However, the Global Occult Coalition does very much care for individual lives to a degree. They have no interest in mass slaughter or burning down towns. They once again just care for the sovereignty of their nation. They have a few major advantages over other groups. One is that they are technically legal. They're often funded through black book operations and hidden behind certain name drops. The Global Occult Coalition is, however, legal in its member nations to a degree. This gives them the ability to sideline police or other federal bureaus when necessary, and can of course get into places legally that the other ones can't. And it's a good way to keep the police or other organizations from causing problems for you. They, of course, are also one of the most highly trained and militarized of any of the groups, and able to draw upon, when truly necessary, the strength of their member nations. But most of the time this is not necessary, as their own personal armed forces are usually strong enough to deal with anything. They don't use the anomalous much, but they are capable of using it. Their higher-ranking members often relying on anomalous technology to give them the edge, most notably in powered armor, laser rifles, and other such technology of the sorts. They are notorious for the destruction of the anomalous rather than its capture or securing. They are, however, not dogmatic about this. They do it as a matter of protection. They are willing to secure, contain, or leave things be if they are proven to not be a significant threat. However, they do tend to prefer to burn it than let it live. This, however, has caused them with many issues to other groups, most notably the Serpent's Hand and the Chaos Insurgency. But they are also understanding, all the groups, that sometimes things do need to be destroyed, so they aren't actively hunted. They do, however, have issues going into nations that are not member nations, so that could be considered an act of breaking national sovereignty. However, international threats and all that. The Global Occult Coalition has notably grown in size with certain new member nations. However, certain reorganizations has also made it lose members. The Global Occult Coalition is considered perhaps the most dangerous out of the 5, purely because of its skill at martial fighting that the other ones just can't always match. The Serpent's Hand is considered the third major faction in the SCP universe. Their goal is much different than the others, to at least a degree. They see that the anomalous is the same as reality in many cases, and people, objects, or entities should be allowed to roam free regardless of a quote-unquote anomalous status. This, however, is not dogmatic, as they do understand that some things do need to be contained or destroyed if they are proven to be too dangerous. However, this is usually reserved for only the biggest of threats. The Serpent Hand, despite what people say, is not some anarchist group that has no leadership. It has leadership and it has ranks. However, it is much looser than the other 5. This gives them a certain level of flexibility that the other ones can't manage. After all, it's a lot easier to get things done. We don't have to worry about bureaucracy as much. However, this comes with the weakness that a lot of the Serpent's Hand groups don't always work together perfectly. Coordination is much harder in the Serpent's Hand than any other group. For this reason, the Serpent's Hand can look like it doesn't have proper leadership. However, this, like I said, is a double-edged sword. They often operate in what is best known as serpent dens, which often manifest as extra-dimensional places that allows them to go in and out of reality when seemingly necessary. How they do this is not fully known to outsiders, and even low to medium-ranking Serpent's Hand members do not know how these function properly, or where they come from. The Serpent's Hand has the advantage that they are able to convince the anomalous to work with them pretty much willingly, as many SCPs are more than happy to tear down the other factions that would seek to jail, sell, or destroy them. However, they can't convince everybody, as they come off as very idealistic, and most SCPs do legitimately not care about the broader world. Those that do often find themselves in the Serpent's Hand employ. This is well known, notorious for factions like the Scp Foundation and Martial Card Dark that has learned that when something breaks containment, it has a tendency to like to join the Foundation. This is like the Serpent's Hand. This gives them an edge on their enemies, as they're often able to capture 4 more test subjects and get information from them. However, this often leads to issues of its own. The Serpent's Hand, however, does have problem with dealing with non-intelligent SCPs, as they do have issue using them. Now, one may, of course, logically ask, why would they not just reveal the SCPs to the world if that's the main goal? Well, they understand that humans are easily scared and frightened. If they were to suddenly learn about all the horrors of the anomalous world, they would panic and likely go straight into the grips of their rivals. This naturally means they must be secretive about the operations for the time being. However, they constantly work to undermine the hiding efforts of the other groups, either seeking to expose the SCP world little by little, or in some way making culture more accepting of it, in one way or form. This is often countered by the other groups to varying degrees, but it's still an effort they're making some success with. The Serpent's Hand is sometimes considered to be one of the most moral factions, but even then, just because you have good ideals doesn't mean you're good, as they are notorious, as they're sometimes willing to get a bit extreme and can sometimes occasionally favor SCPs above normal humans. After all, how many people are you willing to sacrifice in the name of one entity? This is a question the Serpent's Hand must wrestle with quite frequently. Marshall, Carter, and Dark is considered the fourth major SCP-based power. Their major business model, if one could call it that, which it technically is that they simply want money, profits, and power. They don't really care about higher ideals like the other factions do. They don't want to really secure the anomalous, destroy it, or liberate it. They want to sell it, and they want to turn a mighty profit. Believed to have been formed from a corporation that once dealt in normal trade, then turned to the black market, and then turned to the really black market, the SCP world, they now seek to use the anomalous to increase their own coffers. And so far, they've done incredibly good at this. They are probably the most wealthy faction out of the five, with some minor concessions that must be given to, like, ones that have connection to international powers. But that still makes them incredibly rich and incredibly powerful. They can recruit from pretty much anywhere because everybody wants to make money. And they will sell and trade just about anything. They have very little qualms of what the moral ramifications of what they're doing is. They simply want to see that bottom line go up. And that's what they're pretty good at. There's a lot of things they can sell and trade. And the more you look into it, the more unsavory it tends to get. From the somewhat benign to the downright despicable, Marshall, Carter, and Dark has your back. The operatives are perhaps some of the least trained of all the groups, with no higher ideal other than profit. However, they are mostly work together due to some very strong contracts of attacking fellow members. This, however, gives them a few edges. One, they are very willing to use the anomalous to get their means, both as a means of selling and getting money, but also as a means of making sure they can do the operations. Operators are well known for using SCP-based items, including something relevant to cybernetics, modifications, and other things ranging from cosmetic to downright horrifying. The Marshall Card Dark, however, is very careful to make sure these entities or SCPs do not gain power over their members, as sort of or control their mind in some way like that. After all, it's not good to have someone be buying stocks of your soul, after all. Marshall Core and Dark does seem a bit like it doesn't care, but it does have some reason to work with the others, mostly because they go out of the way to either contain world-ending threats or destroy them. They will not bust into other factions' facilities to steal world-ending or massive society-destroying threats. Anything else is fair game, though. However, they do want to keep the world preserved. After all, money's pretty much useless if you don't have a world to buy it in and sell it in, after all. Society is kind of important for that. So they will work with the other factions to deal with massive threats. But they don't always when it's come to more minor threats. They are master saboteurs and able to break into places that even the Serpent Hand would find impressive. However, they are not necessarily the most powerful sometimes. Money's nice, but a lot of factions can throw that around necessary. But they are, of course, a very important part of the ecosystem that is the SCP world. And they are often occasionally dealt with that allows other factions to sometimes collect items from others. This makes them a sort of neutral party of sorts, as they're quite willing to take and sell to other factions their stuff, for the right price. The Chaos Insurgency is by far perhaps the most dangerous of the 5 factions in the SCP world, and by no small measure. Because while the others seek to preserve the world in some way, shape, or form, even if they're willing to do horribly unethical things to do it, and often for their own selfish ends, or just not really caring about the little guy, they still want a world where people can live, eat, breathe, and live. The Chaos Insurgency does not see it that way. The Chaos Insurgency is a bit of a hard thing to tell. It basically never works for the other four groups, and their members would happily kill themselves before giving any information to their enemies. The Chaos Insurgency is believed to have either been a defection from the Scp Foundation itself, or defection from all four of the other major factions, or perhaps a fifth faction that was secretly there the whole time, plotting from the shadows. The Chaos Insurgency is a bit hard to tell, as it's well known, or at least heavily believed, that they use reality warping SCPs in order to disguise their true origin. So attempts to figure where they come from and their true motivations are difficult. It's well known that they use the anomalous, like the other factions. However, they use it in a way that is best described as disgusting, as they are madmen in many, many ways. They will tear down society, burn everything to the ground, and they have little regard for anyone's life, quite often including their own. The Chaos Insurgents seems to be in league with several extremely powerful SCPs, things that no of the other four groups have been able to contain or have only had limited success at. The other four groups will notoriously work together to stop the Chaos Insurgency whenever possible. However, they are a very dangerous threat. Unlike other factions that will generally be small enough not to break containment of certain dangerous SCPs, these guys do not care in the slightest. If there's an SCP that can end the world, most factions will be smart enough to bust into that guy's base. These guys don't care. They want that. Somehow. What the end game of it is, no one's quite sure. Whether they plan to remake the world in their image, or they're working for some ulterior motive, or it's all part of some master plan, no one's quite sure. It's well known, though, that many of their ranks are defectors from the other four groups, and this is a massive problem as they have vast intel of the other four. They can sometimes straight walk up into their facilities before anyone realizes what's happening. The blood will be on the wall. The Chaos Insurgency could be the most powerful out of all of them, maybe more powerful than all four, but their true strength is unknown, as it's well known that any attack the other groups have had to deal with are probe missions, not really a full force attack, and that should scare anyone. All four factions have records of missing areas or government facilities or serpent dens or marketplaces just being destroyed, abandoned, or otherwise gone missing. And a lot of those times, they're attributed to the Chaos Insurgency. Sometimes just as an excuse, other times far too real. The Chaos Insurgency might be one of the greatest threats to the SCP world, at least coming from humans. And they are a massive threat, and no one really knows their true power. And every day the other factions struggle to figure out their true meaning. Anyway, those are at least in my mind, the 5 major factions of the SCP world. Now granted, like I said, there's no strict canon. And quite frankly, I definitely have made up some of my own ideas to make the factions more interesting in my opinion. However, I just wanted to give my interpretation or ideas of how to do them. If you like this video, please like, comment, subscribe. If you want to see more of my interpretation of these factions, like maybe a specific faction overview, or you just want to see more of my content in general, please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're going to become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.